Senator Tuajan is first on the list, then Senator Cordy.
So, as though most of you must be aware, I've been involved in this issue since 2012. Have brought up the issue with the Burmese delegation the first time when they were visiting Quebec in 2012 for the IPU. Again last year with the, I think his name is Zaute. He's a political spokesperson for Aung Suu Kyi, and he refused to answer any questions on the Rohingyas. In fact, he would say no Rohingyas. But let me ask you a question that I have been asked consistently since this crisis has started, and see if you can answer it, because I couldn't answer it. I was asked constantly, why is the world not paying attention? Why is the world reacting so slowly? Is it because we're Muslim? Is it because we're brown skinned? And I really didn't have an answer for that. I mean, there was a hesitancy for the world to even call it a genocide. And we could see the pictures that were coming out. We were seeing the videos of what was coming out. We heard stories of the women being raped. And the government officials before you, even when I asked about, the children being born out of rape, and he sort of said yes, but they're also, some of them are married. Why the hesitancy? Why are we hesitating to, call it what it is? It's been mass killing. There's been, women have been used, sexual violence. They've been held as slaves. Why? But I can't answer that question when I'm asked. Maybe you can give me an answer for that.
I don't have an answer neither.
The island.
Senator, may I respond? I'm not sure if this is an answer, but it might give insight. The international world order that was created after World War II was based on the experiences of the people, what they experienced in World War II, what they witnessed, the horrors that occurred. That generation is pretty much disappearing. They were the constant touchstone and reminders of human depravity, the low that human depravity can sink to. And it seems that our political leaders today, and not just in Canada, but anywhere in the Western world, those people are no longer there to be reminders, or there's very few left. And the voices that do speak out are not listened to. Instead, we have governments looking at issues of human rights and defense of the weakest in the world from the perspective of, how is this going to affect us economically? What does this mean for trade? Now, in the case of Myanmar, Canada doesn't have any huge economic interests in Myanmar. So we are ideally placed to be raising this issue in international forums and being a loud voice. Canadian leaders, not just our current government, but governments of the past, have gone on the world stage for decades talking about our commitment to human rights. It's very easy to stand up in front of a camera and a microphone and condemn atrocities being committed by a government or individuals. But frankly, words are cheap. It's when you take action, or you put action behind those words, that you really achieve results. So I'll leave it at that.
Earlier about the importance of social cohesion between the host community, Bangladesh, and the refugees. And when you're talking about 1 million refugees, I was very pleased to be part of 2 groups that brought in Syrian refugees to Nova Scotia. But there were people complaining about the small numbers of Syrian refugees that we brought in. So I can't imagine 1 million. So how do we work on working with the government of Bangladesh and with the Rohingya to develop this social cohesion? Because you spoke about how accepting the Bangladeshi people are, but there's an election coming up and you never know what happens after an election. So how do you build that social cohesion? Because this appears to be, I think you said earlier, a long-term crisis.
You refer to social cohesion and what can we do? I think social cohesion for Bangladeshi society, the generosity which they've displayed shows a level of social cohesion. However, I think that part of that comes from the fact that there is an expectation that these people are not going to be here permanently, that these people are not going to eventually be absorbed into Bangladeshi society and take jobs away from Bangladeshis. I think that as as a nation, if we're going to try and promote social cohesion, it should be through an avenue where we can at least give hope that there's going to be change down the road. Now, I heard some of the previous presentation, and a lot of the focus has been on the issue of the refugee camps and what we can do to help the refugees. But if you talk to the refugees, a lot of them, I mean, they're looking at being in the camps for a while, but the vast majority of them want to go home. They want to go back to the lands that they were expelled from. That's their desire. There is not this overwhelming desire to be resettled in other parts of the world. Not only that, the situation of the refugees in the camps is very different from the Syrian refugees which you referenced, because the Syrian refugees, a lot of them were business owners and professionals. They were integrated into the society, whereas the Rohingya refugees were basically excluded from society, excluded from all those things that are normal for people in society. So if we are going to move forward and give them hope, not only do we need to follow the path of individual accountability through the Rome Statute and the ICC, but I believe, and as we called for in an open letter which we released back in mid-September, that the Government of Canada, as a signatory to the UN Genocide Convention, needs to invoke that convention so that the switches that start tripping once that happens can start happening, and that it's not just individuals that are held accountable, but the state of Myanmar itself is held accountable. That was the very reason that the UN Genocide Convention was drafted and established. Canada is a state party to that, and so is Myanmar. So, we can use the levers that are available through that to try and say, this is the hope we're giving you, that we will hold those who did this to you accountable. And what that would mean for Bangladesh is that they would see that it may not happen immediately, but eventually down the road we will reach a point where the Rohingya can return to their homes, can get citizenship, and be able to live in peace.
Thank you. Senator Cole and then Senator Hartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to all of you for your very informative presentations. So my question is actually to all of you, and it actually, your last statement, Mr. Khan, actually, I think is a good segue to my question. As you saw before you were here, we had representatives of Global Affairs Canada, and we heard some very sincere and informative, and also, I think, for us, encouraging things that were coming from our government in response to the situation of the Rohingya in Myanmar and in Bangladesh in the camps. I'd like to hear from the various perspectives that you come from, what your read is on what Canada is doing. You, Mr. Tinmau, did I say that correctly? Mentioned from your observations. No, you weren't speaking about Canada, but Canada's part of that. You talked about the aid money consumption business being a sort of a dominant sense of what was actually happening in the camp as opposed to what was required in the camp. So I'd like to hear where you think Canada is in terms of our development assistance, in terms of our humanitarian assistance in the camp, also in what we are providing in Myanmar. What are some of our levers with the Genocide Convention that you're referring to? The longer term, more patient ICC potential, and also sanctions. So how do you rate us on how Canada is engaging on this across that board, and what's your advice to us as we go forward?
Thank you, ma'am. I am thankful to my government for all it has done so far. It's not only myself, but my colleagues as well echo similar sentiments. Right after we recognized it as a genocide, right after we pledged the $300 million, right after we did the revocation of Suu Kyi's citizenship, a lot of these are very well acknowledged and very well received. Coming back to the aid money business comment, this is a comment from one of our people on the grounds, one of our staff members, I would say, who is taking care of the schools and the vocational training centers that we have. Got some vocational training for female victims of the massacre, and we teach them sewing, give them skills, and give them a hand sewing machine each. So that sentiment that he shared, it's for the schools that are out there that are teaching until grade 8. You see, and it is his perspective. True, when you do not have an end goal in sight, when you do not have college and university education in sight, it is natural that a school that you would go to, for all the quality that can be delivered, you would not have that quality. So I can understand his perspective, where he's coming from. But that doesn't take away the fact that there are organizations and that there are efforts out there which are very concrete and which are yielding results. I mean, the Red Cross Field Hospital, which I would pass every time I go and visit our schools and our work at the camps. I know some doctors who actually went from Ottawa to the field hospital. So there is a lot of good work that's happening, and the government of Canada's name can also be seen in some of those projects when you're passing by, when you're driving by to get to the camps. So a lot of good work is out there, and there's a lot of gratitude towards that as well. I mentioned also in my address that we thank you for that, for the developments which I did not see prior to the last visit that I had back in 2015, for example, and the ones prior. People would drink water from a dirty pond. I actually saw people scooping water, and there was no aid. There was very little aid, and they were forgotten. We are forgotten people, you see. Now, come back to the effectiveness, if I say, then I would go into root causes. Our network and our advocacy work, we want to focus on the root cause of why we are where we are. And that is how you address, the core of the situation. So, like Professor Akavan mentioned, you go to the very leaders who have caused this massacre, when you pursue them through ICC. When you go through the Genocide Convention, then you bring the state of Myanmar to account, a state that has ratified the convention itself. How would the 1 million people who long going back to their own lands? In fact, some of the interviews even said, I don't want to go to Canada, I don't want to go to United States. Some of them, they just said it out in their interviews. What will I do there? I will not have my cattle, I will not have my goats, I will not have my own land. And you cannot bring in 1 million people. You cannot bring in even 10,000 people, I would doubt. You see, they're uneducated, poor, desperate. They're not like our fellow brothers and sisters from Syria, let's say, who come from, law, medicine, and business backgrounds. No. So with all that in in consideration, my people have to go back to their own lands. And how would we make that happen? Through our policy is by focusing on the root cause. And the root cause is the government of Myanmar. Unfortunately, there hasn't been much that has been addressed to the root cause. Or if it has, if there are any policies that have been put into effect, they haven't yielded the results. We haven't seen any changes in Myanmar. The sentiment out in the street in Yangon, in the capital, is still that those people are not from here. They're human fleas, they're cockroaches, they gotta go. That's still the sentiment out there. So I would gauge our effectiveness based on how much we can address the root cause to enable my people to go back to their own homelands, get recognized as human beings and as citizens. That's how I would gauge it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony today. We appreciate you coming and providing us updates from your perspectives on the plight of the Rohingya refugees.